Joining us, we have Abe Yohalashet, Director and Head of Tolling for SiriusXM Connected Vehicle. In his role at SiriusXM CV, Abe is responsible for leading and managing all tolling projects, including project prioritization, strategic planning, conceptual design, development, execution, implementation, and testing. Prior to joining SiriusXM in 2018, Abe co-founded PayTolo and was critical in the acquisition by SiriusXM of PayTolo. Joining Abe for the fireside chat is Samuel Johnson, CEO, Orange County Transportation Corridor Agency, as well as Kelly Bartlett, Connected and Automated Vehicle Specialist at the Michigan Department of Transportation. Abe, you want to take it away?
Abe here with SiriusXM Connected Vehicles.
I'm Kelly Bartlett. I'm a Connected and Automated Vehicle Specialist with the Michigan Department of Transportation. It's great to be here.
Yep, good morning, everyone. And we also have Samuel calling in from California. So thank you for joining such early time. So SiriusXM Connected Vehicles. So as she mentioned, a part of the tolling division, but we work very closely with our with the rest of the e-commerce team as far as connected vehicles. So our major focus has been our team specifically on tolling. So everything from transactional payments to POI data, and also our smart routing feature. So we're moving from mobile, and now with being part of connected vehicles, moving into the vehicle. The best part about this, even working with our e-com partners, is expanding that service beyond tolling to provide additional services. So parking, fuel, all within the vehicle. But for today's discussion, wanted to bring in some of our we've been working very closely with the government, especially on the tolling side and some of these DOTs throughout our history. So I wanted to bring in their perspective as far as, why are we doing this? How can we leverage new technology, both from the OEMs and what we see here from, even from startups, and what's changing in the dynamics of technology, and the impacts it has both on policy and some of our toll operators beyond that. So we'll focus on today's discussion around, funding sources and how EVs and fuel efficient vehicles has impacted funding for new roadways. We'll touch upon some connected vehicles as far as, how can OEMs magnify some of the communications needed from the roadways and from our government partners, how they can work together. And then we'll touch upon autonomous vehicles from a policy and service operational standpoint, and the impacts that has on both ends. So, just to kick things off, just, quick little history here, right? So traditionally, roads and infrastructure was funded through the gas tax, which was signed by President Hoover back in, 1932. So from there, that's been the major source here to provide any sort of new development or repairs. But instead, states and local municipalities had to really transition into tolling and, looking at the bond markets. And Samuel will kind of touch upon that as far as, what they had to do, as, the economy is starting to, get impacted over the years. And then so with that, I'm sure you guys saw in the news, the Biden administration also finally passed that infrastructure bill, about $1 trillion being spent. And, some of the high notes I saw on the White House website, which was kind of unbelievable to me, was, 1 in 5 miles of highways and major roads and 45,000 bridges are in poor condition, right? And so the new bill has about $110 billion in funding to repair roads and bridges in some of these major areas. But, that's not enough, and it's not sustainable long term. So that's why a lot of these agencies have moved to tolling. So nationally, tolling does about $19 billion a year based off of 2020 numbers, which accounts to about 7.3 billion roads driving on these toll roads to generate those revenues. And, and I'll hand that off to Sam to give us a little bit insight from his side of things. But, right now, the just like OEMs, agencies are going through their own technology transformation. So, I'm sure we have folks coming from all parts of the U.S., but you'll start seeing where cash collections is being removed from some of these roadways, and they're moving towards what they call all electronic tolling. So from our team's perspective, and from a SiriusXM standpoint, the only technology out there right now is RFID. But we feel that vehicles can be part of that equation for operators to leverage the technology of a vehicle to interact with the customer, facilitate those payments and reconcile that back to the agencies. And so that's what I want to, kick things off here. And, so I'll start off with you, Samuel. From your experience as, the current CEO and the former chief operating officer at a transportation corridor agency, you guys just went recently through your all electronic conversion. And so if you could just shed some light there and also just touch upon, how important, having your own funding source to do these repairs and bridges does help.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me, Abe. You highlight the key points that are important in the business, right? Transportation definitely has our challenges with achieving sustainable funding. As you know, the gas tax was a bet against technology, in my opinion, something we probably should have transitioned from a while ago. But as vehicles become more fuel efficient, and as vehicles convert to other forms of energy instead of fossil fuels, our ability to collect revenues are extremely limited. And as you pointed out, that's why agencies like mine have had to be a little more creative in looking at how we fund our transportation investments that were needed in South Orange County, where we're located. So our model was somewhat unique. We are two public agencies that were formed by our local governments, our cities and our counties, with some enabling legislation from the state that allowed us to come together and lay out a plan on what we needed for transportation investments. And that required us to go to the private equity markets and get private bonds, which we got over $4 billion of principal outstanding. And we brought that money in to build 20% of Orange County's highway network, so about 420 lane miles. So it's a sizable network, and the way we pay back those loans and the way we pay for ongoing improvements is tolling. And tolling is it's a great tool for this purpose. It accomplishes that sustainable revenue aspect, and it also allows for a different model where we can actually manage demand. So both of these aspects are important as we look to the future, and technology plays a key role in this. So using tolling, we can collect those revenues, but we can also set our toll rates to manage that demand. Common utility model, tolling or transportation is the last unregulated utility in the country, in my opinion. We just don't understand how valuable that resource is, but I think people are starting to recognize that more and more. So agencies like mine, we're leveraging this technology in this tolling model to accomplish all the things we need to do. And we continue to try and find ways to get better and better at it. Like you mentioned with all electronic tolling, we made our conversion to that model in 2015 and got rid of cash booths. So we improved safety and free flow conditions on our facilities so that drivers just drive and they don't have to worry about stopping to pay. They don't have to stop and work with the machine. They don't have to stop and hand cash to an individual. And that aspect has allowed us to advance our abilities, both to collect revenue and to manage demand by using small incremental adjustments in our toll rates, sometimes pennies, to make sure we are always providing a free flow trip to our customers.
Thank you for that. And then Kelly, so in the state of Michigan, we've been reading and, when we were discussing, you guys are looking to invest into your own strategy as far as maybe not going down the traditional route of tolling, but as a greenfield project, you want to just give us some insight of, the viewpoints of where Michigan might go as far as in this direction.
Sure. Thank you, Abe. And let me say at the outset, just in full candor, we are obligated by the Michigan legislature to do a tolling study that's underway. It's going to be done within the next year. So we don't officially have a position on tolling in terms of, yes, we're going to do it. This is when we'd roll it out. We, with deference to the legislature, have to wait for that study. But here's why we would want to look at tolling, why we really have to look at tolling. As Samuel has mentioned, Abe's mentioned, fuel taxes, the old traditional workhorse, is losing steam. Road agencies look at the budget. How much do you need? With really a two-part question. How much do you need and what do you want to do? For Michigan, probably like many road agencies, we have a goal, 90% of our highways or freeways are going to be in good or fair condition. People would appreciate that. There was a time we were at that. Maybe hard to believe, but for a few years, 2010, 2011, 2012-ish, we were at that. Now, we're not. We're somewhere between 60 and 80% of our roads are good or fair, depending on how you look at it. So just in terms of how we would approach our own household budgets, if you say something's a good bit below the condition where you want, you not only have the cost of maintaining it, but now you're trying to reach back and to improve it to get back to your performance goal. So that's our challenge. It's what people expect us to do. And before we talk about how we do that or anything, we have to recognize that obligation. That's why we are employed, go to work every day. And fuel tax, by several measures, yield per penny of fuel tax, percentage of overall tax rate, tax burdens, fuel tax is not keeping up. This is before we even get to both electric vehicles and the higher mileage vehicles. The calculations we're using rely on a fuel economy of 22 miles a gallon. It's probably high for some cars. It's getting low for other cars. And so we're compelled to look at this. The final thing I want to say, just to give a sense of urgency, a few months ago, we approved our last, most current 5-year plan to sort of kick into gear when we actually start making the practical steps towards actual projects that you'll see. Last until 2026. The next 5-year plan we do is going to be affected by the trends we've seen, and look at some companies that I think we're all familiar with, General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, Toyota. All of those companies have announced publicly a goal of at least 50% of their new vehicle sales by 2030 will be EV. So that means during the life of our next 5-year plan, if these projections are right, that's going to put us that much further away from having adequate revenue to do our job unless we have an alternative. And so sometimes you're drawn into conversations that are difficult, and sometimes difficult ones are necessary ones. And that's really where we are in terms of looking at options.
Yep. And then beyond traditional tolling systems, we're starting to see, your bridges and, your fixed location tolling. We're starting to see new models of toll charging, right? So whether it's express lanes, dynamic lanes, I'm sure you guys are starting to hear a lot about road usage charging, especially for EVs. And then we even did a pilot with the MTA bridges in New York for congestion zone charging. So I know the number one city that pops up in my head is London, who actually has that. So what MTA bridges wanted to do was minimize the flow of traffic into lower Manhattan during peak hours. So they wanted to implement a congestion zoning. So Samuel, with you first, I was looking at your bio during your time at Sandag. You guys were the first ones in the nation to launch your dynamically priced toll facility in the nation. And can you please give us a little background of how that came about and the impacts that will have on the roadways?
Sure. Thanks, Abe. So I won't take credit. I wasn't at Sandag when we first launched it, which was in the 90s, but I was there in the early 2000s where we went beyond looking at it as a research and a planning project, and we recognized that was our future. So making that more of a business unit than just a research study is where I played a role. And it's a concept that's taken hold across the country, as you highlighted. When San Diego was looking at this in the beginning, their core concept was rather simple. We had carpool lanes that were underutilized, and the boards, our elected officials, wanted to see how we could attract additional users to those carpool lanes without impacting performance. So the concept was, could we devise a plan to attract solo occupant vehicles who are willing to use the carpool lanes by paying a fee, i.e. a toll. So it became hugely successful, and it worked very well. So transportation agencies all around the country and really around the world, as you mentioned, are looking at that model and tolling overall for some of the aspects that we mentioned earlier, sustainable revenues, as Kelly highlighted and you noted, but also this demand management aspect. And that's really where technology has to continue to evolve to support what we're trying to do on much larger scales. So managing that demand and looking at those subtle nuances, kind of going back to that utility concept I mentioned earlier, is how do we attract more traffic? And then at other times, how do we deter more traffic to make sure the facility always works in free flow conditions? You know, consumers, drivers, I like to call them customers, they value the transportation they're paying for, even if it's indirect right now via the gas tax, or if it's in a more direct payment model, such as tolling, they expect a level of service for what they're paying, right? And tolling provides that, and dynamic pricing is a key tool in laying out this management concept for constantly balancing supply and demand in real time. So the systems that folks have in place, that San Diego put in place, is constantly monitoring the performance level of those lanes, looking at not just vehicle quantities or volumes, but also throughput, and looking at how do you look at what you're currently performing, what level of performance you're currently at versus the capacity of the system, and how many more vehicles you can attract, right, without without tipping the scale. You always try and find that balance. So that's where dynamic pricing comes in. It's pretty cool. It's not always simple to do. It can become complicated, but it's a very powerful tool in managing that demand to fit the available supply, again, without degrading performance. And I think this is a key thing that folks are going to continue to look at because it's that other aspect we have to recognize for the future of transportation. We started off talking a lot about sustainable revenues, right? But then we also have to recognize that a lot of our metropolitan areas, their highways may be built out, right? So unless we want to continue to have more property takes from private owners or more environmental concerns by paving over more of our footprint, we have to figure out how do we, again, treat transportation like other utilities and manage that demand to fit the supply. And that's where dynamic pricing comes in. So I think it's a very powerful tool, and a lot of folks are using it around the country and around the world.
Great, thanks. And Kelly, I know here locally, your agency is also looking to do something similar with the Flex Lane project on the I-96.
Yes. Yeah, there's two aspects to this. The first I wanted to mention, excuse me, we have a project that we're actively discussing with the Cavenue organization about a public-private partnership where they will actually take over management of a automated vehicle lane between Detroit and Ann Arbor. If you came into the Detroit Metro Airport, you went by one of the potential routes. And we're not using the word toll because that sets off the whole debate. We've still got this study we've got to do. But what everybody recognizes is we're thinking of it, describing it more as an admission charge. There will be a benefit for being in that lane. We're still working out what that benefit is. There will be a benefit. If there's not a benefit, people won't enter the lane and the whole thing, the whole system collapses. But assuming there's a value people see in entering the lane, we're comparing it to an admission ticket. You have no expectation, if your favorite movie's at a movie theater, you have no expectation of going in and watching it unless you pay. Same concept here. So that's one thing we're working on. The other thing we're working on that's actually really in sight of this building is a flex lane on 96 just to the north, just outside this building. And what this will be similar to a project that we had on US 23 between Ann Arbor and Brighton, a few miles west of here. And what we do is we harness technology. Samuel used words or terms a couple times about the customer and the free flow. That segment had some problems. So what we did, in lieu of spending what would have been, I think the last estimate here is $400 million for a relatively short segment of road, we added a flex lane, which you have overhead signals. This is all wireless connected, measures traffic volume. Volume hits a certain level. then what has been the left shoulder becomes open to non-commercial traffic, not heavy trucks, not designed for that, but as a way of relieving that pressure during the rush hour. And we're hoping to do the same thing on 96. So what the customer will see is these overhead signals or signals on the side of the road that will indicate when that left shoulder is. Red signal means no, you have to stay in the traditional lanes. Green signal means no, you can move over and use that left lane. So it's a way for us, without putting more pavement on the ground, to increase the value or the benefit of the asset to the traveling public.
So it looks like we only have 5 minutes. So I'm going to rapid fire these next 3 questions.
Oh, yeah.
As part of the infrastructure bill, there's about $7.5 billion that's going towards EV charging stations. There's a goal by the White House to hit about 500,000 EV stations in the U.S., and that's for your traditional plug-in. But you both mentioned to me 2 interesting projects your respective agencies are working on for an alternative solution to charging. So, Samuel, I'll let you go first with your project, what you guys are working on, and we'll rapid fire through this last sections here.
Yeah, so one of the things we're looking at is other parts of the transportation industry, the manufacturers. You guys are doing a great job looking at technology. And I think in terms of opportunities to advance what we're trying to do with improved safety, mobility, and environmental goals. So government agencies need to be doing the same thing. So when we think about this move to zero emission vehicles, whether they be electric or otherwise, we also have to think about other considerations. So one thing my agency is looking at is moving beyond their traditional plug-in gas station type model charging for vehicles, right? We want to look at the concept of inductive charging, whether that's static or dynamic, with the ability to charge vehicles just as they sit over the appropriate equipment and technology, or whether they're driving over it in motion. So we think this is key to addressing concerns around range anxiety, right? So we all have these goals. Kelly mentioned it earlier. I'm pretty sure everybody in this audience knows that my state, California, is an extremely environmentally conscious state. And we have bold plans to not have any internal combustion engine sold for passenger vehicles in California after 2035. So we're making this huge move there. And we have to think about how range anxiety and the consumer perspective plays into that. So we want to look at this inductive charging concept and see where it fits. Hopefully that helps with range anxiety. Maybe that also helps with the challenge that we see off into the future with lithium still being a limited natural resource. So maybe auto manufacturers don't have to make as big of batteries, or they can use less of that natural resource because they can get more frequent charging. So we want to look at that. So we're going to be looking to partner with a company or companies who are willing to explore that technology, bring in that management mode that Kelly just mentioned that they're looking at, and then also looking at this as a platform for where we think we're headed with autonomous vehicles, right? So if we see autonomous vehicles truly being an aspect in the future, it might be best that those vehicles have the capability to be charged inductively versus, developing a whole robotic arm that's going to grab a charger off a wall and plug it into the vehicle. So I think we have to be innovative on the public agency side, just like folks on the private industry side are doing.
Yeah, we're running short on time, so I'm going to skip, but I want to touch on AVs as you just mentioned, and I'm going to skip to that discussion for you, Kelly. Sure. As a policy, being deep within policy as far as in regards to AVs, what would you like to share with the audience as far as how does the government look? There's vehicles out there now with level 1, level 2, and some OEMs are applying for level 3, right, to release. Yeah. So from your standpoint, how do OEMs interact? What are your guys' thinking of sure. managing this?
Yeah, well, thank you. And let me say a couple things just quickly. First, you have to begin with an orientation that says this will be a good thing. You've got to work out a lot of problems. Everybody knows that it's not going to be perfect day 1. We're not going to have level 5 day 2. But we have to begin with the orientation to say the goal is worthy, that it's worth getting here. Second thing we have to do is recognize appropriate division of scopes of responsibility. Federal government, longstanding tradition, regulates design, construction, performance of vehicles. States do driver licensure, liability, and traffic laws. And so we very much need a federal AV law. There's been 4 attempts to have one at the federal level. We don't have it. We've got to have that. States can do things within their scope of regulation. Michigan has chosen a path that we believe is appropriate for Michigan, almost unanimously supported in the legislature, but it's different than what other states might do. Principally, we don't require testing or deployment permits. We open, all 27,000 miles of public roads in Michigan are open to AV testing today. And that's a different approach. We can talk about the benefits of that or why it's appropriate, but the federal government has its role that they need to step in on, and then states have to figure out what's the right approach for the areas that are under their jurisdiction.
So it looks like we got some bonus 5 minutes. Is that right? Oh, okay. I was like, where did this come from?
Yeah, no prize.
Great. And then I know we're running out of time, but I'm sure Samuel would like to discuss in the AV world, who are we going to charge, right? Do you charge the manufacturer, the service provider, the rider? So, I know we don't have time to deep dive there, but we do have a booth here at the SiriusXM Connected Vehicles. We do have a demo vehicle that has our e-commerce solution in there. Please take a look. And we also have a test vehicle outside where we also have our tolling demo. We have a little test track around this place. So feel free to stop by the booth. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Samuel, for waking up early and joining us here, and Kelly as well too.
Sure.
So
thank you.
Hope you guys enjoy the conversation, and if you want to continue it, come to our booth. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.